Something to notice in this sprawling chapter on art from 1715 to 1840 is that you are getting many more kinds of styles. When we looked at the 17th century, you could pretty much talk about the Baroque and have it apply to most of that century, most of the regions. And you could talk about the Rococo starting around 1715. But now, look, here we are. If we're looking at the chapter on Britain, we're looking at classicizing architecture, neoclassical architecture. But then we're also looking at architecture that's meant to revive the Gothic past, looking back to the medieval world. We're looking at what we would call functionalist architecture, meaning it is the architecture designed for its function with no ornamental elaboration, not trying to make a kind of aesthetic statement, just serving a function. And that is a feature of modernity. And then we go to the trends in British painting, and we've got Hogarth, who's doing his social satire, a form of genre painting, really, but in this kind of new biting satire that's meant to expose the hypocrisies of the different classes in Britain. So he is using the features of illusionism to kind of create what seems to be a window into a world that satirizes the social conflict between the aristocracy and the bourgeoisie. They each want what the other has: money and status. Okay, flip a page, and we come to portraiture. And so then our style is different. This is taking a long time. So here, the style is not satiric. It's not using funny little details to get you laughing at the people. Here, we've got neoclassicism meant to make you admire the aristocratic woman, Lady Sarah Bunbury, to make her seem as if she is an emanation of beauty and grace from the Greco-Roman past, giving her a kind of exalted identity that upholds her aristocratic privilege. Interestingly, Gainsborough is also creating a portrait of an aristocratic patron, here a couple, and he's also doing it to please the aristocrats, but here not using neoclassical features, but instead creating a kind of illusionistic rendition of their beautiful clothing, their confident stylishness, and mostly their land holdings, making the landscape element itself speak to their wealth, because remember, this is still a world where agrarian landholders have been in power, and this is the agrarian estate they rule over, a little bit like they're the king and queen of their estate. So this is entirely different. So first of all, in terms of social structures, this centers on a scientist performing an experiment for an audience. A scientist is not, by definition, an aristocrat or a worker. A scientist is a middle-class figure who works with industrialists to create new ways of making, doing, and understanding the world. So this is not a portrait in the traditional sense, though it does compare to some of Rembrandt's action portraits. So it compares, interestingly, to Rembrandt's portrait of Dr. Nicholas Tulp, who's creating a demonstration of his scientific knowledge in front of an audience of spectators who are amazed by what he is showing. So this is also a painting of a scientific demonstration, of an experiment on a bird placed in the air pump, this interesting tool of science that was important to the developing technological knowledge of the time. And like Rembrandt's painting, we have spectators, although here it is not a group of spectators who are fellow scientists, but a group of spectators, a mixture of women, girls, and men and boys. That's an important point. Spectators who are in awe of what this scientist can do in controlling life and death. That's the promise here of this experiment, that the air can be drawn out of the pump, the bird nearly dies, but the air can be let back in. So this painting lavishes attention on the equipment used in the kind of industrial scientific performance. And it is a painting to a degree about scientific culture, but it is also a kind of romanticist version of a genre painting turned into something else. It's not exactly a genre painting because science isn't really an event of everyday life. It's sort of a mixture of action portrait genre and romanticism that aims to surprise us and create a sense of mystery about the world we're living in. So with its very dramatic Caravaggio-esque light, as if we see it lit by candlelight and by the moon outside the window that the little boy seems to be pointing to, it creates an atmosphere that is very romantic. And it can seem odd to think of science as having a romantic atmosphere, since we tend to think of science as rigorous, empirical thinking. But it's important to know at the time that science was greeted with mixed emotions. Mary Shelley writes Frankenstein with a sense that this kind of power to control nature, to control life and death, is one that actually scientists may not be entirely trusted with. So as we keep exploring Romanticism, which is going to continue to be a major force in artistic culture, it's worth remembering that it started with literature. Along with novelists like Goethe and Mary Shelley writing Frankenstein, we have poets like William Wordsworth, who already in the 1770s, 1760s, are expressing the feeling that the world is too much with us. Getting and spending, we lay waste our powers. Little we see in nature that is ours. A sense that scientific industrialization and its materialist culture is actually causing people to lay waste their true powers, that there is an alienation from nature and their humanity because of this new culture of scientific industrialization. So this time of industrialization and revolution is a time of social fracturing and dissent. We are seeing different kinds of styles because we are now seeing dissenting ideas. In a social world of competing class interests, we have different value systems in competition. And so we no longer have a kind of homogeneous culture. And this is going to continue to accelerate as we move forward in the modern world.